Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. Today we're going to cover the history of the Soledad prison, also known as the Correctional Training Facility. In the early months of 1946, Carlisle Thorpe property, located 4 miles north of Soledad on Highway 101, was selected as a suitable location for a new prison that would eventually become known as the Correctional Training Facility. It sat on almost 1,000 acres of property and was purchased at a cost of almost $240,000, or at the cost of about $240 an acre. Quite the deal today. The prison sits adjacent to the newer Salinas Valley State Prison, which will be covered at a later date. Soledad Prison began operating in 1947 as a minimum to medium security facility, housing 600 inmates in war surplus Army barracks. Later, the South facility was designated as a farming camp. In 1948, Richard A. McGee, then Director of Corrections, for which the Corrections Officers Academy in Galt, California is named after today, presented a plan to the California legislature, outlining the need for a facility for young adult offenders so that they would not be exposed to the hardened criminal elements existing in other prisons. For that reason, the central facility of the prison was built and later activated in December 1951. In 1954, there was a need to separate the older, more problematic California Youth Authority wards from the younger wards for the same reasons regarding older adult offenders. In 1956, work was started on the construction of the North facility that subsequently started housing inmates in September 1958. As stated in my last video, the Mexican Mafia started at DVI in the late 1950s, but as officials grew tired of their violent activities there, they were often shipped out to other facilities. One of the first stops for many was Soledad, or Chole, as it was called in Chicano slang. Some of the individuals housed there were Eddie Pelon Moreno from Norwalk, Mike Poor Slim Mulhern from Primera Flats, Joe Colorado Arias from Colton, and Gabe Little Sluggo Castaneda from El Hoyo Maravilla in East Los. On April 27, 1962, according to CDC reports, 12 young Mexican males engaged in a fight in the North facility on the third tier in a skirmish that lasted approximately 15 minutes. A second fight ensued shortly after between a few other individuals in the day room. The combatants resisted responding staff, and the combatees were sent to the Adjustment Center in Owie, pending their CDC 115 disciplinary hearings. A subsequent investigation found out that the participants were drunk on Pruno, or inmate-manufactured alcohol. In addition to in-house sanctions, the local district attorney pressed charges. May 18, 1962, MA members Nick Gallegos from Barrio Nueva Estrada, Eddie Moreno, and Mike Mulhern were charged in court for their participation in the disturbance. Ramon Rodriguez and Ramon Romero were also charged. Their hearings were set for May 28th of that year. In June, the charges against Pelon Moreno were dropped, but the Monterey County District Attorney amended the charges in July, with the trial set for August. Pelon's excuse was that he was only shadowboxing with his homeboy Nick Gallegos when the guards all of a sudden attacked them. A fellow prisoner and cited participant Ramon Romero testified that he saw a guard kick Pelon in the chest, and that another guard hit him in the head with his flashlight. Pelon was found guilty and shipped off to San Quentin. Mike Mulhern pleaded not guilty to his charges, but was also convicted in a Monterey County court. Joe Colorado Arias was able to get off on a legal technicality, and original founding MA member Gabriel Little Sluggo Castaneda also pled not guilty. In his case, the jury was deadlocked, which resulted in a mistrial, and the charges against him were ultimately dismissed. La Nuestra Familia Mexicana prison gang was formed at the California Training Facility circa 1965, but by 1967, the original founders were moved to San Quentin. In 1968, the name of the three main facility complexes that then housed approximately 3,400 inmates was changed from Soledad State Prison to the Correctional Training Facility. In addition to DVI and the California Institution for Men, previously, parts of CTF were considered to be a stronghold for the NF. Aryan Brotherhood member William Tank Noah made his prison reputation back in 1967 when he and two other young Nazis stabbed inmate Roger Dale Smith more than 50 times. Smith survived and became famous as Pincushion Smith due to the many scars that I saw later when I had him at New Folsom Prison in the late 1980s. As I recall, his body resembled a big block of Swiss cheese with many deep holes in him after multiple unsuccessful attempts on his life. Alexandro Lechuga of Hawaiian Gardens, homeboy of MA founder Huelva Flores, escaped from Chole on May 29, 1969. He ended up taking off from Mexico and operated a curio shop in Juarez, as well as being spotted in Mexicali. He is listed as being deceased March 7th, 2014. Romeros who were housed at CTF Central in 1971 were individuals such as Moose Bazuri, who was mentioned in the last episode, having assisted Sleepy Betancourt kill DVI Corrections Officer Connie Prock. Fast Eddie Torres, depicted here in the striped shirt, far right, the Avenues gang, was also housed there around the same time, as well as others from La Mariposa. September 6, 1972, Aryan Brotherhood member Mickey Manier killed Nuestra Familia member Julio Lugo at CTF's North facility, hence the term "send him to Lugo's pad," encoded Aryan Brotherhood and Mexican Mafia communications when referring to carrying out a hit on the NF. Almost immediately after the hit on Lugo, several NF members stabbed and killed MA associate Thomas Flaco Oropesa at the facility. On December 25, 1972, NF members Frank Villalobos and Pablo Najera were killed by Mexican Mafia members Ramon Mundo Mendoza, Robert Nego Cabral, and Larry Huesos Gallegos at the Central facility. These were retaliation attacks for the NF killing MA icon Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena earlier on December 17, 1972 at Chino's Palm Hall. On October 17, 1976, NF member Richard Scooter Hernandez de Redlands was killed by NF members Black Rudy Del Real from San Juan and an inmate named Quintana at CTF. On that same date, a drug dealer named Antonio Tony Ocon of Familia Cinco was killed on the streets of Fresno, I believe by shotgun blast. Once again, I've heard rumors from some people saying that the NF was previously named Familia Cinco. But I ask you, how could they be renamed Nuestra Familia if Familia Cinco was still operating in 1976, which was around the time they were pretty much finished? June 1978, a bomb made with gunpowder was found by correctional officers on Soledad's O-wing on one of the tiers. Investigation tied the explosive device materials back to NF associate Christina Brown Eyes Cobos, the sister of Larry Cub Tapiz. 3 days later, an inmate named John Earl Walker was fired upon by the use of a zip gun by NF member Frank Chango Chavez de San Juan with gunpowder from the same contraband introduction by La Brown Eyes, who was married to NF Lieutenant Joe Crocos. As I recall, towards the end of his heyday, Robert Death Row Joe Gonzalez was held at CTF when authorities hit his cell and found a long hit list along with other incriminating evidence that was used in the early 1980s RICO case against the NF. 4 staff from the correctional training facility have been killed in the line of duty. January 13, 1970, a large fight ensued on a Soledad prison yard comprised of blacks versus the Aryan Brotherhood's Billy Buzzard Harris, who was shot in the groin, Harpo Harper, and Chuco Wendiker. Understanding is that the inmates had organized in groups on the yard when Chuco Wendiker walked over and socked well-known boxer W.L. Nolan in the face, and the riot was on. Blacks fought back, but got the worst of it. W.L. Nolan, who started a black revolutionary group called the Vanguards at DVI and then was transferred to Soledad, as well as 2 others, were shot to death by guard O.G. Miller. 3 days after the incident, maximum security Y-Wing Soledad Corrections Officer John Mills was hurled to his death over a tier. The Soledad brothers were the inmates accused of being accomplices in his murder. These were George Jackson, Fleeta Drumgo, and John Clutchette, who maintained his innocence even years later. Clutchette denied ever being a Black Guerrilla family member up until his release from prison on June 6, 2018, when he was doing time on a different murder charge. George Lester Jackson even wrote a book called Soledad Brother, after all three were charged with the murder of Officer Mills in retaliation for the murder of the three black inmates killed earlier by prison staff. Allegedly, a note was pinned to Mills' body stating, "One down, two to go."
Was the incident for which you're charged now, was it a revolutionary act on your part?
You asking me to confess to something? As an
Unless you want to, did you kill the man?
Look, one of the most important elements of guerrilla warfare is to maintain secrecy. I've killed nobody.
Three suspects were moved to San Quentin isolation, including George Jackson. July 23, 1970, Officer Shaw was stabbed to death with a shank fashioned from a sharpened steel file at the North Facility Recreation Yard, where he was discovered in an equipment shack with multiple fatal stab wounds. Officer McCarthy was murdered on March 4, 1971, while working in X-Wing, collecting mail from prisoner and BGF member Hugo Pinnell at cell 104. As he opened the food port to collect the outgoing mail, Pinnell stabbed McCarthy in the neck with a shank. Allegedly said, "Take that, punk." Officer McCarthy succumbed to his injuries the following morning at the hospital located in Fort Ord, Seaside, California. Pinnell was then shipped to San Quentin Adjustment Center. Program administrator named Connett was murdered on May 19, 1971, and was the last of four killed in the line of duty, as far as I know. Violence continued at the facility over the years. In February 2019, CTF saw protest after activists alleged that guards staged fights between inmates in order to justify lockdowns, something that prison staff flatly denied. In the summer of 2020, when COVID-19 was rapidly surging throughout the nation, prison officials at Soledad State Prison were hit with a lawsuit. According to some sources, CDC pulled a highly illegal and brutal show of force known as Operation Achille that ended with several injuries to incarcerated men. Men were allegedly rounded up, zip-tied from behind after being thrown from their beds in the middle of their sleep, taken to the chow hall where they were forced to sit, four men to a table, for 6 hours straight. During that time, it is alleged, the men were questioned about social discord taking place out in the streets after the murder of George Floyd, as well as their ties to Black Lives Matter and the Black Guerrilla family. As I've noted in other videos, there is no doubt police and corrections officers have engaged in past racist and criminal acts, but it is also very evident that there are some on the far left who will exaggerate incidents and conditions. As with many things, there are usually two sides to a story, and often the truth lies somewhere in the middle. Other notable inmates housed at CTF over the years were Bunchy Carter, head of the Black Panthers in Los Angeles; Eldridge Cleaver, also Black Panther, writer and political activist; Warren Wells, who may not be as well known as Carter or Cleaver, but he is known to many people from back in the day in the greater Oakland area. He was convicted in a 1968 shootout that resulted in the death of fellow young Black Panther Bobby Hutton. I had Wells at New Folsom Prison, where he worked as an inmate clerk, and he was said to be present at the January 1970 incident at CTF, whereby three black prisoners were killed. Juan Corona, who was a serial killer that was later transferred to Corcoran State Prison in 1992. Donald DeFries, leader of the Symbionese Liberation Army, who was transferred to CTF but escaped in 1973 and was later killed down in Los Angeles by police during a standoff with the SLA. Sirhan Sirhan, the assassin of Robert F. Kennedy, was held at CTF until 1992. Dan White, politician and assassin of San Francisco Mayor George Moscone; and Harvey Milk, self-described mayor of San Francisco's Castro Street, a well-known neighborhood with a large gay population. Dan White served 5 years of a 7-year sentence at CTF. And there was Jaime Brugada Valdez, a rapper known as Money Sign Suede, murdered in a shower at CTF, serving 2 years and 8 months on charges of being a convicted felon in possession of a firearm, as explained in my Swifty Blue episode. Once again, feel free to leave comments if you ever worked at or did time at Chole. Hope you're enjoying your summer and never take one moment for granted. Remember, it's not the years in your life that count, it's the life in your years. God bless. For now, Gabe Morales signing off. Gangsters, cops, and politicians.